3. Miami University of Ohio, a bastion of conservatism. Coming to Miami University was such a breath of fresh air that I never really missed Guyana. I didn't even have a yearning to return there. Here I was, pursuing my tertiary education in an environment that was totally unfamiliar, but at least not life-threatening to me. I had come to Miami University first because my sister Hazel was enrolled in Western College for Women, a traditional women's institution right next door to the Miami campus. Secondly, a good friend from Central High School, Leslie Austin, had enrolled there 1 year earlier. He was my senior in the debating team at Central High. The ultimate reason, however, was that my grandfather had left just enough money to get me through my first year of tertiary education. Miami University was an institution in the Midwest of the USA, the Corn Belt, a bastion of conservatism. I was surrounded by college students who, in the main part, had no idea about international affairs. Where are you from? Is it Ghana or Guyana? Is it in Africa or in the Caribbean? South America? Is it part of Jamaica? Then I was in a dormitory of 286 students with only 4 black students. I was a novice with absolutely no understanding, far less recognition of American racism. This apparent non-responsive approach to racism baffled both the white students and the few black Americans that I came across. Miami University did have its full share of peculiarities. First of all, it was located in a town called Oxford in the state of Ohio. We fought an unending battle to distinguish our school from the University of Miami in Florida. I soon learned to refer to the other Miami as Santanyu. Miami University got its name from the Indian tribe that lived in the area, the Miami tribe. In 1795, the defeated Indians, which included the Miami tribe, signed the Treaty of Grenville, which finally ceded most of their territory in Ohio to the United States, setting the stage for Ohio's statehood in 1803. The tribe later moved to Indiana and then on to Oklahoma. Within 6 years after I had graduated from Miami University, the university was finally able to come to grips with its past. In 1972, it instituted the Miami Heritage Award Program as a laudable gesture designed to enroll citizens of the Miami tribe of Oklahoma or members of the Miami Nation of Indians of the state of Indiana. They were all offered a full 4-year undergraduate college experience once they met all entrance requirements for admission to Miami University. Even though the state of Ohio was considered a slave-free state, Miami University itself had an old history that revealed strong ties with the slave South. One story was that the slave owners in Virginia had considered the young officers of the Revolutionary Army poorly trained in English traditions to become suitors for their daughters. They therefore supported the establishment of a college in a town to be called Oxford, where a suitable replacement for the English officers could be trained. Indeed, even as late as 1964, dormitory traditions required that you wear a jacket and tie to dinner every day except Saturday, and that you observe a formal seating arrangement at each table, while the waiters, which were mostly the few black students, served meals. There was little opportunity for me to associate with the American students, but I did fill in my time with other events. I played in the small soccer team, which was coached by the foreign student advisor, until an injury sidelined me on the bench. From then on, I acted as the manager of the team. I also became very attached to the International Students Club, rising to the level of president in 1967. I could not participate in Miami's main sporting activity, which at that time was American football. Indeed, Miami, because of its winning tradition, was known as the cradle of coaches. Miami University, however, did provide me with a very solid undergraduate foundation. Its economic department, in which I was a student, was modeled after the conservatism of the University of Chicago. The faculty at Miami University held strong to the neoclassical school of economic thought, associated with the works of such giants as Milton Friedman and George Stigler. In terms of macroeconomic theory, the Chicago School of Thought rejected Keynesianism in favor of monetarism. By the mid-1970s, this academic affinity had turned to a new classical theory heavily based on the concept of rational expectations. It's interesting that I would come out of this experience with a more radical leaning economic perspective. I graduated from Miami University with a Bachelor's of Arts in Economic Theory in 1968. That is, in microeconomic theory of the firm. My parents took a bus ride from New York City all the way into Ohio to be present at my graduation. Career and work prospects were the furthest from my mind. With no pre-thinking, I just stayed on and enrolled for the master's degree in 1969. Learning the history of economic thought. My leftist leanings in economics was probably a convenient merger of the best of my anti-colonial experience growing up in colonial Guyana with the very introspective work of a few teachers in Miami University. Foremost among these was Professor Harry Landry, who taught a graduate course on the history of economic thought. It was really a fascinating idea to study the history of intellectual thinking. Here I was to be convinced that it was not simply reason and logic that gave validity to one's thinking, but the intensity of allegiance to one's class interests. Even today, this may sound quite doctrinaire, but I do remember the lesson that caused me to shine in that class. We were studying the causes of the rise in the price of corn in historic 19th century England. First, let me give you a short primer on corn prices. In the early 19th century, the word corn in British English denoted all cereal grains, including wheat, oats, and barley. These comprised the staple diet of common folk. When one spoke about the rising price of corn, it was equivalent to speaking today about the cost of living. The raving controversy at that time was concerning the famous corn laws, which were tariffs and other trade restrictions imposed on food and corn imported into England between 1815 and 1846. Principally, the corn laws blocked the import of cheap corn, initially by simply forbidding the importation below a set price, and later by imposing steep import duties, making it too expensive to import it from abroad, even when food supplies at home were in short supply. A raging debate ensued between two giants of economic thought as to whether the corn laws enhanced the profits and political power associated with land ownership at the expense of those who were poor and hungry. These two giants were Thomas Malthus, who wrote a lot about population growth, and David Ricardo, the architect of capital accumulation. Malthus and Ricardo first met in 1811, when Malthus was recognized as the leading economist in England, and Ricardo was gaining recognition as the most effective critic who blamed the Bank of England for the inflation in food prices in progress. In my mind, their debate probably went like this. Malthus: the price of corn is high because the price of land is high. Ricardo: no, old chap, I'm afraid you have it all wrong. The price of land is high because the price of corn is high. Our assignment was a simple one. Who won the debate over the cost of living in 19th century England? I was surprised that no one in the class was willing to raise a voice on Ricardo's behalf. After listening to all types of superfluous analysis by the other students, I got up and said, "Both of them won." That was received with a loud laughter of derision. No one was willing to accept my argument that this was a battle of class interests in production. They all agreed that Malthus's interest was in population growth, poverty, and the suffering of the working class, and it was inevitable that he would lay the blame for a high price of corn on the land-owning class. However, Ricardo did not fit the bill of a member of the land-owning aristocracy. His ancestry was Jewish, his father was a stockbroker, and his interest was in defending capital, not land. All of this is true, but it was a very naive way of understanding class interests in the economic sense. As I pointed out, Ricardo was defending something that only occurs on high-priced land. It was called rent, which was a surplus captured by the landowners that can be accumulated into capital, the growth engine of the capitalist system. I don't think I ever convinced these young white Americans that Ricardo was really defending the capitalist class. They could not see the connection to the capitalist interests in arguing against efforts to force the landowner to lower his price and subsequently reduce his accumulation of rent. There probably were too many interlocutors for them to digest. However, Professor Landret thought it was a brilliant analysis, and I subsequently became Landret's favorite errand boy after that exchange. My enhanced status with Professor Landret was not all to my advantage. He kept assigning me one task after another. One day, I built up enough gumption to challenge him on his distribution of tasks. I am seeing so many graduate students with nothing much to do, and you keep piling on me more tasks. Why don't you ask some of them instead? His response was stunning. "That is the problem, Williams. You don't ask people with nothing to do because that is what they will do, nothing. You ask someone with lots of things to do. That way you will be sure that he will assign a specific time in his busy schedule to do your stuff." Okay, I left it at that. I must confess that from that point in graduate school, I was committed in seeking socioeconomic solutions, first to understand people's economic interests and not their ideological positions. I remember once, while on a mission in Ghana, the issue came up about regularizing tenure for a group of displaced persons in the Volta area. This displacement occurred during the building of the Volta Dam in 1965. Like most hydroelectric projects, the dam and ensuing lake displaced many upstream communities. Some communities were resettled on lands belonging to a different tribe, but with the consent of the village chief. 20 years later, the ministry was attempting to regularize these settlers and found themselves in the midst of an explosive situation where the traditional owners of the land were objecting strenuously to that move. It turned out that while the chief at that time had consented to their resettlement in that area, that was more a magnanimous gesture of goodwill. Putting all kindness aside, this regularization process was about to turn a 20-year-old gesture of goodwill into a surrender of traditional sovereignty over land. The chief was having none of it. Here was the case in which a clear misreading of economic interests had led to an irrevocable conflict between the state and the paramount chief.